So what I wanted to show right now is how we can get to the newest progress in Wirewright. So let's go to junk, and what we are going to do is we are going to clone Wirewright. As you can see, I have this already, the command. So let's call it something. I don't know, let's call it foo. And so this clones the repository, and we are going to wait. And then we are going to enter into the directory here. And now in order to get Wirewright working, what you would have to do is you would have to first install the shards. And I'm going to show only how you can get the newest bits of Wirewright working, because there are also the old bits, and those are built just as I wrote in the README. Now we have installed whatever dependencies Wirewright has, and then our goal is to build the dev tool, and you will do this with the following command. So here is the command that you will have to run to build the build tool, to build the dev tool. Now I'm going to run this command, and I'm going to pause until this command completes. So now that the dev tool has been built successfully, we can try to run it. You can see that this prints the help page, and dev is basically a way to manage presets. Since I have to type these commands with various flags very frequently, I decided to build this tool based on Wirewright, or like using whatever Wirewright provides, and it was quite a nice experience, in fact, building this tool and maintaining it. But what we are going to do, so you can use dev-g or dev-go to list the presets, and we are interested right now in the newest preset, which is WW. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do dev-g WW, which gives us or gets us into the Wirewright preset. We can use dev-x to explain what this preset is all about. You can see it just sets the source file and sets some crystal flags. And what we are going to do then is we are interested in building this WW preset. So what I recommend you to do is dev-b, and then you probably also want native. And again, I'm going to run this command, and I'm going to wait until it finishes, and then I'm going to resume recording. So you can see that the building process starts this way. So now that the WW program has been built as well using the dev tool, we can actually try to run it. So you can see again it prints the help page, which isn't really a lot of stuff at the moment, but we are interested in DwUIR. So DwUIR is one of the or like the only publicly available front end to the new pieces of Wirewright, to the new parts of Wirewright. So let's run it, and this is how it looks. Basically on the right here you have the control log. Now it's going to be quite laggy after some time because the entire system is fairly slow right now. I didn't really sort of optimize it enough for it to be fast, but this is sort of future work. So you can type commands here, you can see, and this is the control log. It will output whatever commands you enter and the responses that the rack gives to them. So now what we can do is you can also go between these panes and between the input field like so. So you can see this shows some little help page here, which tells what keys you can press and so on. So you can scroll using up and down arrows. You can hit page down to scroll to the bottom, like so. You can hit backspace to clear. If I hit backspace, you can see it clears it. Similarly for events. Now, what we are going to do now is we are going to load a file. Now, for that, I will have to, I will have to pray to whatever GNOME gods exist to actually open another terminal, because this apparently is very, very difficult. Now let me see where I can open a new terminal. Let's try here, Alacrity. Obviously if I just hit enter, it won't open a new terminal, because who would want that? Now so I have opened a new terminal. Of course I need to navigate to the directory now, and what I'm interested in is I'm interested in opening a file. Let's call it demo foo or demo rack. As you can see, I have already tried this, and we have this file open here. What we can do is we can save it, and now we can try to load it using rack load, and then we will type the path to that file. So let's do demo rack.wml. Right, I'm going to hit enter, and you can see it's active, everything is loaded, but of course the file is empty. So for a hello world type of thing, we can do something like this. Now rack is a reasoning engine, which is very simple. It's very simple. It's doing very simple inference with side effects, I would call it that. So you don't really have to know a lot about it to use it, although obviously there is no documentation, so even I am going to make mistakes right now. So when you modify the rack itself, you will have to reload it, and you can see that it's now active. And of course, at the moment we do not automatically query logs, so we will have to query them automatically, or I mean manually, right? So we'll have to do rack workspace, and by the way, you can see the help for rack by saying rack help. You can see this this outputs the help for rack here. This flew a little bit out of the way, so you can see that this outputs the help. Now anyway, let's just do rack workspace, and you can see I can workspace query, but first let's list the edges. You can see it says that there's only one edge, and this is our X right here, augmented with some scope information which we don't want to care about, and I can query this guy, and let's do 0x, and you can see we've got our message. So that's how it works basically. If something needs X, it will go and reason through X, and whatever side effects result, it will output them into events in this particular instance. Now this is all very nice, but of course we probably want something a bit more advanced, and so I'm going to very quickly show show the UI part of the new progress with Wirewright. So let's create a file called hello.wml, and I'm going to save this, and what we are going to do is we are going to load it right here. Now we can load it using the mlsrc shorthand. This creates a device that reads an ml file, hello.wml, and we are going to output it to our demo, or maybe let's call it hello, I don't know. Then we can log it just for fun. Let's not do this. Right, so then I will have to rack reload. Of course it says bad source query, which is actually very nice because this is an error that actually says something. And now you can see expected a term, and we don't have any term, so let's just write it here. And you can see it detects the changes and it prints hello here. So let's just make a little window. I'm going to show you the most basic way you can get to graphics, which is DwUIR, or drawable UIR, or drawable UI representation. Now let's create a window. It requires 2 or 3 attributes or 3 properties, whatever you want to call them. the title, the width and the height are required. Without them there will be no window. You will not see any window. Let's create like a rectangle, I don't know, 100 by 100 with fill. Let's do an ugly red color, and I think that's going to be enough. So I'm going to write it. You can see we get changes, but that's not enough. We want a window, so let's do DwUIR window. I'm going to save this, and let's reload the rack. And you can see we've got our little window right here. So what we are going to be able to do now is we are going to be able to change this on the fly. You can see that it reloads. Now, obviously, DwUIR is giving you very, very modest amount of tools, so in very little in terms of like actual UI development. So I can do something like this, right? Let's do color black. So a text requires caption, font. Let's use some kind of font. There are a bunch of pre-installed fonts that you will have to use. One of them is IBM Plex Mono, I believe. Another one is Julia Mono. We can also use IBM Plex Sans. And the size is also required. Now, if I restart now, we will probably see nothing because the Z order is not defined here. So now you can see we've got our text, but it's very, very small. So let's make it maybe a bit bigger. So you can see our text right here. So we can make it pink or something, just for a little bit of horror in terms of designer. As I have said, DwUIR is a very simple like representation for drawing basic shapes, like something like SVG, but for Wirewright. We also want layout, of course, and that's where UIR comes in. So this was DwUIR, and then we need UIR. So what UIR does is it lays out things, and then it passes them to DwUIR. So in a sense, both DwUIR and UIR live in the same representation, so they are interchangeable, so to speak. Basically, what I mean is you can mix UIR and DwUIR, and you can mix them in any way, in any kind of nesting arrangement, whatever. So this is just details though. So let's just attach a UIR device on the hello here on the hello source, and let's output, for instance, DwUIR, right? I'm going to save this, and then if I restart, what we would see ideally is there's nothing changed. But now, as a member of this, we have UIR. Now, in order for UIR to work, we would have to set up a root which would accept our sizes, and then we would be able to use constructs coming from UIR that are not available in DwUIR, such as by stack. So for instance, we can try to stack our rectangles, and as you can see, we've got layout. Would you look at that? We've got layout. We can use X stacks like so, right? We can make two rectangles here, for instance. Now, it's not necessary at this point to specify the width and height of the rectangles, because the layout engine, the UIR, or not the UIR, I guess, just UIR, will compute them automatically. So we can create such an X stack right here, and I believe we will need some kind of size here, although I'm not sure. Let's just experiment with this and see what we are missing, because I do not remember. And you can go on with this, of course. As you can see, I barely remember how these things work myself, because I don't work at this level anymore. What we use to do layouts is we use Microfold. So let's load Microfold. So what Microfold is it is something like the HTML box modal plus Tailwind plus something along those lines. So we can load Microfold by first loading the theme, and the theme currently is stored under theme.ufold.wml, and then we'll have to use Microfold, and we'll have to go with theme. Fuck, that was a slip. And then we'll have to give it nodes, and then we'll give it the actual output, so it outputs UIR. So then hopefully, okay, yeah, and you will have to specify the entity here to be document, because the Microfold theme is a document. So you can see nothing really changed, but that's the same principle at work here, that Microfold is an opt-in that is living together with everything else here. So the first thing that we can do is we can do this, and you can see with style root instead of root true, everything continues to work. What's interesting though is you can start using some more interesting things. So let's just do the following, right? Let's remove our previous example, and now you can see we've got our text. Now it's pretty small, so let's make it a little bit larger. So you can see that we have the ability to do things like these. Let's maybe make some kind of sign-in form just to demonstrate how this might function. So we can do something like this. You can already see a bug here. We are incorrectly computing the clipping box for the text, but that's just a nuance, a little bit of nuance. So what we are going to do, for instance, is we are going to create a group here. Perhaps we are going to make the group's background, let's say BG neutral 800. Let's make the backdrop of the window neutral 900. Now nothing changes because the group is covering everything. So let's center. Let's make some padding here. Perhaps let's make flow column, and then let's make something below here. Hello world. Let's make some kind of gap here. Perhaps let's make the min width of this thing to be, let's do LG. And then let's make maybe some kind of separator. Let's do border bottom, border neutral 700. You can see we've got the border here. Let's do padding bottom 3. You can see we've got that. Let's create something that simulates an input field. Now, nothing that I'm showing here is interactive. Interaction is at a higher level than this. Let's make the borders rounded here, or maybe rounded LG, or maybe even XL, just so you can see. Then let's maybe make some input fields. So let's create an input field for first name. We'll style it as uppercase. We'll style it as font bold, text neutral, perhaps 200. Or maybe 300. Now let's also make the text neutral 400 here, or maybe even 300, I don't know. Then we will need to, well, I don't know what this should be. Then let's make the input field itself. Let's do John here. Now again, this is a simulation of an input field, you know, an actual input field like you see here, for instance, in the rack application would require some interactivity layer as well on top that emits such markup here, that emits Microfold and so on. Now let's do something like this. We'll do BG, let's do BG neutral 700 here, and you can see we've got our input field ish thingy here. So we'll do perhaps P2 or P1, right? We'll disable the leading by setting leading tight so that the sizes are correct. Let's do text neutral 100. We can actually just make this a little bit more indented here. Now we need to group these. There's a gap that I don't want, so let's maybe group these. Let's make this flow column and gap. Let's do gap 1. So we can have something like this red. Now let's maybe make the borders around it. Now when I was talking about selection, what we can do is we can do selection, and this enables selection, and then we can do selection anchor, which is the cursor position, and then selection span, which is how long the selection is. And you can see we've got a blue cursor there. Let's make it white. And you can see we've got a cursor there. What we can do is we can increase the span, and you can see this is a visual representation of an input field, but obviously there should be something that changes these values, that changes the anchor, that changes the span, that generates these templates, and then works with them. So you can see that I can move the cursor by changing the anchor. I can move it to the very end like so. Now you can also change, of course, the let's maybe set a negative span here, and then let's maybe move it to 3 or 4 here, just so it can be seen. And we can change the color by changing selection text. Let's do black. You can see everything is nicely visible. You can also make it perhaps green 500, and perhaps the text will be green 950. This doesn't really matter that much, right? That looks very ugly. So we can also make obviously a border here. Let's do a border green 400, let's say, as well. Now 500. Now the next step, of course, is to make sure that these things only activate when the field is active. So let's create a queue that this field is currently active. And what we are going to do next is we are going to say that only in an active queue environment will we be able to do this, and only in the active queue environment will we be able to set the border to green, otherwise the border will be neutral 700, for instance. So if I now remove the queue, you can see we've got our stuff back. Now let's just do this to 600 maybe, so that the border is there. Now you can also trigger conditionally based on some properties. So I can say something like this. Fucking Vim, man, that's not cool. So yeah, you can see that we can do this stuff. Now we can also copy this and paste this like so. Let's do last name here will be Doe, and you can see we've got, let's make this one active here. Now queues are fairly interesting, because I can put a queue in the very top here and it will activate both of them, as you can see. We can also do upward flowing queues. So for example, I can say that this hello world text will emit a queue is foo. Now this queue, let's say, flows all the way to the window, and let's say the window has foo, will have backdrop, let's say red 500. You can see it suddenly became red, and let's say that it will also push this queue down. So we will basically has foo is, let's say, ugly, and this means that the queue will flow down. And let's say that when I am in ugly, I will say text, let's say blue 500. Okay. Now that's not good. Q ugly, in ugly, text. Oh, okay. I'm overriding it, I guess. which shouldn't happen, but like let's just forget that this happened. So you can see that we can arbitrarily nest these things, let's say in ugly bg red 300 or something. And again, I'm overriding this. This shouldn't be happening. This is a bug because this has less, or you know, conditions have more specificity. Now this means that, let's say I do something like hover is foo, you can see everything is normal. The moment I set hover to true, everything is ugly. Very, very nice. So, well, maybe we can make a button here. Button, let's do sign in, and something like that, right? Let's do like forgot your password here, and then we can do something like group. Let's do sign, or let's do like recover it, and then let's do maybe underline here. Fuck. So yeah, something like that. Maybe gap 5, or not 5, I guess. We can maybe do text like 3XL or something, just so it's visible, right? And you can do maybe text blue 500 here, and that's that. So this is all very, very, very interesting, right? So we can do text LG here, for example. Now this is all very nice. This won't resize. In order to resize automatically, like if I resize it right now, it won't work. In order to resize it automatically, you would have to do some logic on the rack level. Basically, you would watch for events which we can receive like so. So if I reload the rack now, you can see that the events get printed, right? Here they are. As I have said, it will be quite laggy, but yeah. So you can see we've got the events here. Let's just clear maybe, and it's going to be much faster. So you can see we've got our events. You can do stuff, hello world, right? And so the idea now is that, well, I've shown like what I wanted to show, right? So we can just look into rack itself. So rack itself is written using the terminal UI implementation of DwUIR. Everything else on top of that is the same that I've shown before. So you can see here we've got the model, and here is the implementation of the rack app itself. And you know, to demonstrate this, perhaps I can I don't know, I can add something to the control log. So here's the definition for control log. We can add, you know, hello world here. And then in order to reload the markup, press Ctrl R, which is a debug shortcut, and you can see we've got hello world. So the same principles apply, right? Yeah. It's just that this is a terminal renderer instead of a window renderer. So you can do like fairly similar things up to a point. Of course, you cannot load images and stuff, but this entire app is built on a similar set of principles. You can just press Ctrl R to refresh. And we can open the window again if you want your window back. It says the ID here, 17. We can open Windows 17. We can close Windows 17. Oops. And that just works. And when you're ready, you can just do rack exit.